You recognize the walk-on music?
Kevin, where's my crowd? You promised me a standing room only crowd.
You know, the ambassadors bring their own crowds and their own delegations. You're going to have to work on your delegation skills, I think, to bring that on. Congressman Himes, it's good to see you. Again, welcome back to the Politico stage.
Thank you.
You visited us for our defense summit last year. We have 15 minutes, and I want to get through a lot. And a lot of us were asking, you know, about the transition first of all. So let's get right to that. I mean, there's a lot going on though. In the news, we've had election security breaches recently. Ukraine is on the offensive. So then after that, we'll go around the world, get your thoughts on some of that as well. But let's, you know, set up a little bit with Biden. He gave his historic speech last night. And, you know, you were in the press because you were, you know, in the news about the decision to move on from Biden to Harris. Tell me what your thoughts were about his speech last night and how you're feeling about what you're seeing.
Well, what we're seeing is a convention that I think would have been radically different had the president not taken the selfless decision that he did. I mean, I can only imagine what it would be like to be here with thousands of people, most of whom were thinking, and this is just polling, quite apart from my sentiment, that we would lose. Now we feel like we're on the march. We feel like we can win the presidency. We can take the House. Senate's more complicated, but people are feeling very, very good, very optimistic. The president's speech, you know, in this day and age of vibes, it's easy for people to forget that what really matters to people, to the people out there, is policy. And so, okay, so this is the vibe election and Donald Trump wants to be a dictator on day one and, you know, coconut trees. You know what? Insulin is now $35 a month for Medicare recipients. There are 10 drugs, the prices of which will be negotiated for the first time in American history. You know, bipartisan infrastructure law, bipartisan, biggest investment ever in this country's infrastructure. That is what really matters to people, even if in this sort of very social media, vibey, influencer world, people get distracted by stuff that at the end of the day doesn't matter as much as the policy. And of course, the president gave a fairly detailed
detailed, very long, very late. Yes,
I'll stick with detail.
Well, look, if vibes matter less than politics, you know, take us back to your decision making. You know, after that debate, I mean, that was a kind of a bad vibe moment, despite whatever anyone would say about the policies. Was that difficult for you in the moment?
It was difficult. You know, loyalty is a big part of politics. And sometimes it's too big a part of politics, right? MAGA today. My contention would be that, you know, MAGA adherents who will stick with Donald Trump regardless of the fact pattern, regardless of the convictions, regardless of the language, regardless of the decay, that is overweening loyalty. Loyalty is good to a point. So yes, it was painful because the question is, you know, will you be perceived as disloyal? Would I be perceived as disloyal to a man who had a remarkable presidency? But at the end of the day, just as the president recognized that his prime responsibility is to the country, I recognize that my prime responsibility was to my constituents, most of whom have said, you know, this guy's going to lose. And ultimately to, you know, the difference between an America that is run by a President Harris. Now, by the way, at the time I made that statement, I didn't know it would be presidential nominee Harris, or a country run by Donald Trump.
Well, you know, you're the intelligence ranking member, so maybe you knew something. But, you know, on intelligence, explain, is there an effect or is there a reason related to intelligence behind, you know, your decision or after the decision, what you've heard? Is there an intelligence reason to want Joe Biden to step out and make room for someone else?
So there's no intelligence reason in the sense of, you know, is President Biden capable of being commander-in-chief? You know, if Joe Biden has one massive differentiating asset, it is his decades, generations really, of experience in foreign policy and national security. We're fine there. But of course there's a national security reason to want the Democrats to win. And that national security reason is that a Donald Trump presidency is a presidency in which we probably walk away from our commitment to our allies at NATO, probably walk away from support to Ukraine, probably do a bunch of things which hearten Vladimir Putin, which hearten Chinese dictators, which hearten Iran dictators. Donald Trump, amongst his many attributes, has this bizarre magnetic attraction to autocrats, to dictators. And you know why? You know why? Donald Trump in the presidency found himself in a place that he never imagined he would be in, which is in a system of checks and balances. And he hates those checks and balances. So anyway, yes, there was a national security reason in the sense that I contemplated what a second Trump term would look like for the United States of America. And I said, we got to do everything we can to avoid that.
Well, to clarify, you said there's a national security reason to want to have Democrats in charge. Was there one to want Biden out and have someone else in?
Well, so at the time, and this was right after the president's NATO press conference, that I went public with my belief that the president should step aside.
That was enough. That was all you had to see.
Well, no, it had nothing to do with that press. And a lot of people asked me, "Oh, was that just about?" The point was, this is not. This is back, 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
This is not about how President Biden does in any given press conference. In fact, a Democratic Party that is going from one press conference to the next, one debate to the next press conference, to the next statement by President Biden saying, oh my gosh, is this going to be a good statement or is this going to be more like the debate? Imagine if that's where your frame of mind is as you go into November. That is no place to be.
Bring us forward now. It's the Kamala Harris show this week. Senator Kelly told Politico on Monday that he said, I'm not worried about it at all, asked, about her creds for global leadership. She gets it. She understands the value of our alliances, the importance of NATO, how NATO is just not important to our allies' security. It's important to our own security. She gets that. How well do you know Kamala Harris in that vein? What can you tell us about what to expect?
So I spent some time with the vice president and watching the vice president at the Munich Security Conference last winter. And, that was a moment where the world, including the ambassadors who preceded me on this stage, had one question, which is the United States there to help, the civilized world, the Western world, against Russia or not? And I watched her for a period of a day plus put those concerns to bed. And look, she's been a senator, she's been vice president, and vice president gets the president's daily brief, the vice president gets briefed by our intelligence agencies, the vice president is part of an awful lot of foreign policy and national security discussions that are unique to that role, saving only the president.
I mean, but do you have a sense of how different a Harris presidency might be from Biden? When, I think of Biden as a 20th century stalwart. He's a man of the current / old international order. NATO is vitally important. Or do you see any potential for change, anything radical? Do you have any sense of that for her?
That's a super interesting question, and I mean, let me just speculate.
Please.
I don't.
We love speculation here at Politico.
Right. What could
especially
go
when
wrong?
It's on the record.
Yeah. One thing is for certain, which is that there is a radical generational change afoot. Right? So Joe Biden was there for all of the Cold War, and
all of the Cold War.
Well, yeah, pretty much all. He might have been pretty young in the early part of the Cold War.
Yeah,
but
close.
no, his sensibilities were formed in the Cold War. And that's not to say it's good or bad, but the Cold War, where the US versus Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact versus NATO, that is ancient history today. The world is much more complicated. It is not a unipolar, it is not a bipolar world, it is not a unipolar world. Europe is important, they matter. We have dictators with nuclear weapons. I mean, this is a much more complicated world than the bipolar Soviet versus US world. And, the vice president has come of age and has grown up in that more complicated environment. So yeah, I don't know what that really means in terms of change in policy. I would frankly be pretty surprised to see any sort of dramatic change in policy. But yeah, it's probably going to be a little different way of looking at the world.
I have lots of thoughts on it, but we'll take it, maybe issue by issue with the back half of our chat. I want to talk, since you're here and you're the intelligence ranking member, let's talk about Iran and this hack and election security. Yesterday, ODNI put out a statement, ODNI, the Director of National Intelligence, saying that Iran was responsible for the recent attempted hacks into the Trump and Biden-Harris presidential campaigns. The reporting was that basically Roger Stone was hacked and then was impersonated to get to other campaign accounts. It's like a double spy job right there. Now that we know that's out, my question, instead of asking you, can you confirm any of this, but I'm curious to know about the process. When did you learn about this? And what can you tell us about what's being done after? To the final question, which is, should this campaign and other campaigns, or should American voters still be worried about election security for the rest of this year?
Yeah. I mean, the answer to that question is yes. Don't ever get complacent about the ability, the relatively advanced ability, the ease with which foreign powers can mess with our elections. Look, the Russians showed that it is cheap and easy to do with what they did in 2016. They broke into the DNC. They had lots of embarrassing emails that embarrassed Democrats and whatnot. And they showed, back then, it was a lot easier back then, it's still pretty easy. Let's buy a whole bunch of Facebook ads that say that Hillary Clinton doesn't like Jesus or whatever it is. And so it is super easy to do. So what does that mean? That means at least two things. Number one, well, no, let me say three things. Number one, yes, the intelligence community, the FBI needs to be all over this. This needs to be the priority in the time leading up to November. They're very good. They're going to do that. They need to name and shame.
You're the overseer. Are you
the overseer?
Are you confident that they are?
I am confident that they are very, very good at this. I'm also confident that there's always a threat that you don't see coming around the corner. So I'm not going to say that they're going to get it 100% right, but they're very good at this. And they need to do what they do. They need to indict. They need to name and shame. They need to disrupt. They need to melt people's computers who are trying to influence the election. Number two, and this is really important, we will never fix this problem in its entirety, and the election interference thing is a small part of a massive problem, which is that the American public is no longer, let me be more precise. Elements of the American public are no longer critical thinkers about information. We've allowed this society to become so polarized that we don't care what's true anymore. We care about whether we get constant doses of the information that titillates our political sensibilities. This is why people, are abandoning newspapers, abandoning local papers in favor of InfoWars or whatever equivalent is on the left. Look, folks, if we can't develop a critical sensibility, because a critical consumer of information is the bedrock on which a democracy is built. And so I tell my constituents all the time, if you're doom scrolling and you're minute 45 and your hair is on fire and you're red with anger, you are probably being manipulated. And so I'm here to tell you, policy issues, whether it's Medicare or how we handle NATO, these things are complicated and everything is shades of gray. So if you think that the world is good versus evil, traitors versus real Americans, you are no longer a constructive contributor to what I like to imagine is the greatest democracy.
Why don't we do lightning round, about 3 minutes, maybe a minute each on China, Ukraine, and Gaza. So, no stress or pressure there. The Ukraine question simply is, from similar to our last panel, we've seen them push into Russia, the Kursk invasion, whether that's leverage or something different. Does that, are you happy with what you're seeing, and do you want to see the Harris administration allow the Ukrainians to use their weapons more and get more advanced weapons?
Yeah, let me say two things about Ukraine, answer your question. First of all, absolutely yes. We have been too little, too late for too long. And so, and by the way, I'm not the guy who is held responsible if, in fact, the Russians choose to, use a tactical nuclear weapon. So maybe it's easy for me to say, but we have been too late, too little for too long. We need to give the Ukrainians both the tools and the authorities to do what they need to win. The other thing I want to say about Ukraine is, because people are like, well, we don't have a strategy. We don't know the plan. What exactly is going to happen? Guess what? Ukraine surprises us over and over and over again. Nobody in this room, nobody at Langley, nobody at the State Department a month ago thought, you know what they're going to do? They're going to invade Kursk, and they're going to take dozens of square miles of Russian land. Nobody thought that. So we need to be humble about what the Ukrainians are capable of doing and support them more fervently than we have.
Do you think Donald Trump has the ability to solve the war between Election Day and inauguration if he wins?
Oh, sure. I mean, look, he built the wall and got Mexico to pay for it. I mean, a guy who can build the wall and get... Oh, wait a minute. He didn't actually do that, did he?
I almost believe you. On China, my question to you is, China is a cudgel in election years. Beijing Biden was a hashtag in last cycle. What are your thoughts on how China is used as a political wedge, but from both sides, frankly, to convince Americans that it's a threat versus how to do something maybe more responsible, more nuanced, and coming up with policy in relations with China?
Yeah, look, China... Is
it helpful that it's used this way?
It's not wrong to think of China as a very substantial threat. Now, I happen to believe that the long-term threat from China is not actually TikTok or a battleship that they developed. The long-term threat from China is if they eventually become the innovators. As long as we're the technological innovators, we're going to stay ahead of China. So it's not wrong to think of them as our antagonists, but you also need to add something to that, which is We also do, what is it, $700 billion in cross-border trade. You know, Donald Trump's idea that if we just sort of forbid the importation of Chinese goods, you think inflation was bad during COVID? Wait till you see the inflation associated with that. So, I mean, we have $700+ billion of cross-border trade. We need to work with the Chinese on things like climate change, on you know, pandemics. We certainly didn't do that quite right the last go-around. There's a lot of areas where we need to, yes, we're going to be very angry at the Chinese for certain behaviors, their way they treat their minorities, their stealing of our IP, et cetera, but we have some profound common interests that we cannot forget.
On Gaza, to close it out, what do you want to see happen differently? Is it time for a policy change? And do you want to see it, you know, when Harris comes into office, should she win?
Well, I hope not. So what has the policy been in the last, you know, since October 7th? What has U.S. policy been? U.S. policy has been to support Israel, but to also press Israel very hard, to fight this war differently, with more of an eye and more of a commitment to humanitarian aid, with more of a commitment to making sure that civilians are not hurt, killed. So that's been the policy. No, I don't think that that should change. What I do hope changes is that the parties, Hamas and the Prime Minister, agree to the deal that we've been talking about for months now. The exchange of hostages for a ceasefire. Hopefully that ceasefire can, rather than reverting to open kinetic conflict, turns into a longer-term solution. So in the near term, I hope that the Prime Minister and Hamas and the Egyptians and whoever else accept the deal. And then, and here's what's been missing. What's been missing is any sense of long-term vision for the region. And you know, I was at the Prime Minister's speech.
I've heard that for, you know, decades. That's been a constant criticism. The U.S. doesn't have the right Mideast long-term strategy, or it has the hubris to think it should or could have such a strategy.
The vision can't be a U.S. vision. The vision has to be a vision of the Israeli leadership and a vision of the Palestinian leadership. And it's not helpful when the Prime Minister, I understand the situations he's in. You know, we remember how we felt on 9/11, September 11, 2001. I understand the situation he's in. But if he wants this to be something other than a brutal military conflict, it's on him to articulate a vision for the future of the Palestinians, and he has not done that. It is on the Palestinian side, by the way, to also articulate a vision that reneges on violence. And so I'm not putting all of the onus on the Prime Minister, but we need a vision that ultimately converges between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Ranking Member Himes, thank you for joining us here at Politico. Appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you around Chicago.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.